You're in the healing zone. This is the podcast showcasing coaches, helping women heal from childhood sexual and domestic trauma. If you are sick and tired of suffering, physically and emotionally, from things that happened to you decades ago, you are in the right place, right now, for your healing to begin. Let's go now into the healing zone with host Oscar Crawford and his special guest, Kelley Croff. She is a woman, wife, mother, a functional nutritionist, and a trauma healing coach. Let's join the podcast now in progress.
Welcome, Kelley. How are you doing today?
I'm fabulous. Thank you for having me, Oscar.
I couldn't be more pleased to have anyone and have you today because I observed the kind of work that you're doing and the kind of impact that you're having. And I couldn't wait for an opportunity to share with you that we might share with others the kind of work that you're accomplishing. So to begin, would you just present an overview of who you are and how you became involved in functional nutrition and in trauma healing?
Yes. So I am a 44-year-old mother who has 3 children. I homeschool. We just got done traveling across the country in a 5th wheel for almost 4 years. And during that time, I was trying to find some healing methods for my son, who was diagnosed with Tourette's, ADHD, and some other conditions. And we got some news that, he could face some additional serious complications as he gets older. And so I was inspired to make some changes in our life. And through that, I found a doctor who was teaching about ketosis and sunshine and the impacts that can have on someone. So I started that with my son and saw some incredible results pretty quickly. And that inspired me to go back to school and learn about nutrition and the ways that we can have a bigger impact just on through our daily choices of what we put in our body, how we behave, our circadian lifestyle. So I went back to school. I got a certificate in functional nutrition. And then I also learned about quantum aspects and how everything is made out of energy. We are all energy beings. So then I explored Reiki, and I'm certified in 2nd level Reiki training. And then that inspired me to do the work on myself. I have a history of chronic childhood trauma. I was a child of 2 addicts, one addicted to drugs and alcohol, the other one addicted to alcohol. So, that just led me down a path of just wanting to dig deeper and figure out what is driving all of this illness in people. And so here I am.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because one of the things I always want people to hear and to be able to feel is that those of us who are really intensely focused on helping people heal from trauma and discover they have the possibility to learn, is that they're hearing from a real person with real experience, real hurt, and that has been resurrected and turned around into something positive and something with a desire to contribute to everybody else's well-being. So thank you so much for sharing that. Go ahead some more. Build on what that has done for you and where it's taken you in your services.
Yeah, so I started practicing ketosis in order to help my son. I wanted to do it with him so he didn't feel alone. And of course, I wanted to lose weight myself. So I thought, well, this will be great. It's a, 2 birds with 1 stone kind of thing. And about 6 months into my journey into practicing ketosis, I realized something else was happening. I was healing my trauma at the same time. And I didn't really understand how that was possible through just a diet change and exposing myself to sunlight. So I started digging deeper. And what I found was our chronic stress or repeated childhood trauma paves the way for chronic health conditions later in life. And the way this happens is through the cell danger response in our mitochondria. And this is also where our mitochondria can get stuck in what we know. Our nervous system, we hear a lot about the fight or flight response, and our nervous system gets stuck there and all of that stuff. But where it starts is in the mitochondria, and they can also get stuck in fight or flight. And this leads to things like inflammation, stored trauma, stored memory in these areas that your mitochondria aren't working or functioning properly. So as I was lowering my inflammation, I was also releasing stored emotions. And I just found that fascinating that was even possible. I wasn't sitting with a trauma therapist. I wasn't, doing anything else necessarily. I was literally releasing this stored energy from my body, and I found that incredibly fascinating and powerful. And I wondered why this wasn't being talked about in the trauma community. I mean, you hear about working with the vagus nerve to lower inflammation, but if you don't get to the root cause of where that inflammation is, which is starting in the mitochondria, then you're just going to have to repeatedly do this vagus nerve stimulation to lower the inflammation temporarily, and you're not making any headway. So through practicing ketosis and the ketogenic diet, it's a really powerful tool for healing all aspects of our being, our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Okay, so here's key things that I really want people to hear from everything that you just shared. You just shared that once in ketosis and having an understanding of what that does down to your mitochondria. I want people to understand the brain development really quick so they can get a real picture of how this all happens. That the flight or fight response is from our original brain. I call the snake brain, because it's literally the brain stem down, and that's all our original ancestors were working with. But over time, we developed more. We developed the two hemispheres of our brain. People call us right brain and left brain, depending upon what we're gifted at. And then we got the frontal lobe, where we began to be able to process all this. But even though we have evolved and our brains have evolved, we still have this instinctive stuff that we have to remediate. And when you talked about from moving into ketosis and all of the spin-off benefits of doing that, you really began to talk about how you shifted your perspective because something transformative was happening in you that just turned your light bulb on. Talk some more about that so people can really get a feel for that.
So the shifting of perspective, so when we're in a chronic state of fight or flight, from childhood trauma or just stresses, trauma of losing someone, our perception narrows. And Dr. Jacob Lieberman has done some fantastic research on this, but it's like you see through two McDonald's straws. That's what your perception is like. And as you repair that fight or flight, you repair your nervous system and you go back into rest and digest, those straws disappear, and now you've got this perspective of the world that is shifted. You see more, you can feel more, your entire experience of the world changes, and it's really fascinating.
Well, the nervous system itself, I think I know you're right when you describe how we burden our nervous system by looking through the two straws. I have a daughter who has some retinitis pigmentosa, a genital birth defect with her seeing, to where her peripheral vision just gets smaller and smaller and smaller the older she gets. Now, she's lived a lot longer than it was told that she would, but she's still seeing and she's still managing her independent life. But the nervous system, we don't think about, well, we can't learn how to translate quickly enough how to know that if we take our hand off of a red hot stove burner, then we lessen the damage we cause to our hand from being burned. Well, it's the same with the nervous system. Our nervous system, when white hot, is really burning out our capacity to process information that our brain is having to deal with all the time. So we're always stuck in that, okay, either get scared or fight somebody. And as adults, if we've matured that way as adults, then all we're looking for is a reason to run or a reason to fight. And more often than not, even though we couch it in flowery language, we're fighting with people all the time based on things that happened to us 30, 40 years ago.
100%.
Continue,
Yes.
please. I mean, you're giving people just the rightest kinds of things.
So after I was able to recognize that this is what was taking place, I really started to look at it from a really different perspective, and how I could help other people understand this. I mean, so many people come to me and talk about, oh, I've got this abandonment wound I can't let go of, or, I don't connect with others very well, or, just these common things that happen as a response from childhood trauma. And when I tell people, when I say, listen, I can help you with this, but it's not going to be in the way that you think. We're not going to sit down and rehash all of this stuff. We're gonna change your diet. And people don't quite understand. In fact, I'm working with this lady right now who we've been talking for almost 2 years on Instagram, and I've been trying to tell her, look, this is the pathway to healing for you. I can see it. I'm here anytime you need me. She finally came to me about 3 months ago, and she said, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready. And so we're walking through the steps of doing this, and while she's going through the process of transitioning to ketosis, she's having a lot of emotions come up, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and it's the body's way of releasing it. You're going to have to go through it again in order to get it out. And it's taking her some time to recognize that, okay, I could see this. I could see this happening. But because I've done it myself, and I know that this is the way through it, is the way out of it is to go through it. So I can see her progress already, though she's not quite recognizing fully. I mean, she's starting to grasp it, but not completely. And I said, give it 6 more months, and you will have a very different perspective.
Absolutely. The thing that you're reminding me of the most is one of my most exciting discoveries. I was in an organizational meeting one evening, and a young high school student there came to me and said, I really appreciate this evening I got to spend with you. I'm sorry I'm never going to get to do it again. And I asked that 3-letter powerful question, why won't we have the privilege to meet again? He said, well, I'm going home to kill myself tonight. So after spending a bit of time with him, I got him to agree to have a time with me the following day, because I had a gift for him. I wanted to give him a brick. I wanted him to carry the brick with him everywhere he went and write on that brick with a felt marker what he was feeling at the time, so we could be able to pinpoint those things for him when he got back in a week. He came back, the brick was covered up, and I said, well, did the brick talk to you yet? He said, no, it didn't talk to me. What was it supposed to say? I said, well, look at everything that you wrote on it, right? And he still didn't get it. I said, well, look, I got something else for you in case they didn't communicate. I have a cement block here I'd like you to carry with you for the next week. And then he got really irate. I'm not carrying no blankety block, cement block around. I said, well, why wouldn't you want to do that? Because it weighs too much. I said, well, son, if you can get to that, you can get to the privilege of putting down all this stuff that you're carrying that makes you want to kill yourself. And I'm going to tell you, that was 30 years ago, and this young man now has maybe longer than that. He and his wife have daughters who are in high school. They're living, all of them are living a successful life, and it would have died that night if I hadn't been through my own suffering to be able to tell them, you don't have to live like that. And that's exactly what you're doing with this person. She doesn't have to live like that, but she took a long time to get convinced.
Yeah. It's powerful how we are given the gift of people coming into our lives strictly for the purpose of sharing our gifts with them.
Exactly. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you and have you talk about, and I find this, and it's tragic. It's that people, as a marker, this is called identity attachment. But people become so attached to their pain that they will fight those of us who would help relieve them of it because it's the only way they know themselves. Would you talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. We build this armor. We develop this personality or these character traits that we then call our personality in order to protect us from whatever it is that's happening in our lives, whether that's domestic abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, or just the pain of witnessing something. We don't want to relive it, so we develop these characteristics that we then later call our personality. And the truth is, we all are love and light at the core, at the center of our being. And we build so much on top of that to hide it and protect it. And once you start getting a taste of that love and light that lives inside of you, you don't want to go back. You don't want to put up those barriers anymore. And it's a lifelong process, I think, and we have discussed before that I will continue learning and undoing the damage that has been done, probably for the rest of my days. But once you get a taste of what you're capable of, what really lives underneath all of that armor, it's an incredible experience. It's like being reborn again, or I imagine being baptized and reconnecting with God, or all of these other experiences, maybe even a near-death experience. I was so close to death. I went to bed every night thinking about how I could kill myself without hurting my family.
I understand.
If I could just run away or pretend I was kidnapped or any of these things, and life was so miserable. And I don't have an ounce of that misery anymore. And when things get hard, which they will because that's life, I am able to use these tools and these gifts that I've been given to recognize that everything is temporary. Any pain I'm experiencing, any difficulties with marriage or children or whatever, it's all temporary. And I've gotten through the worst of the worst so I can get through anything I'm given now.
I'm with you. I'm in full agreement with that. And when we can help people appreciate that, their power will be reborn.
Yes. That's a better way to put it, or not a better way to put it, but another way to put it. Other than you are love and light inside, it's your power, it's your gift. We all have one, and you just have to pull back the layers or the shields or the onion and expose it and sit in it and become comfortable with it and look in the mirror and be proud of it. And that's fully, it's capable. You're capable of having that kind of life. You don't have to live in that dark place anymore.
Agreed. And it's amazing to me how I have the perception that it is my experiences of pain that have been my most significant teachers. I've been to school, I got degrees, and when I look back on my life, it is really my painful experiences that have taught me more than anything. And maybe the learning taught me to be open and available to hearing some other approaches, but it really was my pain. And when I realized I was tired of pain, I looked at some avenues and some tributaries that could lead me to some other experiences. And it seems that same kind of thing happened to you. What do you think of that as process?
Well, what do you mean? What do I think of
Okay,
that
so
as process?
it's neither of us have spoken about the really pleasant experiences that we had in our development that were crucial to our development, but that our painful experiences led us to the places where we ask ourselves new questions about how can my life become different. And when we begin to ask those questions, we hear somebody say something. We see a movie, we read a book. Something is ready because we're ready. It's ready to speak to us because we're ready to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just little things, like setting out to try to help my son heal or, feel better. Through that, I ended up feeling better. I ended up transforming my life, which is really what needed to happen. I couldn't try to help my son when I was sick myself. So there was that. And then along the way, little things have happened. I've been in a bookstore and my kids are running around and asking me questions. And I'm like, oh, I just want to look at the books and see if I can find a good book to read. And because they were, bugging me as kids typically do, I just pulled the book off the shelf and I was like, I'll just take this one. I didn't even read what was on the back of it or what it was about, but it was in the self-help section. So I thought, well, it'll do something, maybe. So I got it home and it was one of the most powerful books I had read. And not because the message was great, but it was powerful because that's exactly what I needed right at that moment. And somehow there was divine intervention. I just pulled that thing off the shelf, and that was my message that I had to hear in that moment. Also going to, different AA meetings across the country while we were traveling, I wouldn't want to go and I'd put it off, and then I'd find one and I'd eventually show up and it never failed that one of the people speaking had a message that was specifically for me in that moment, resonated perfectly, and was the message I had to hear that day.
I hear that. I do. One of the things that I've grown to believe over time too is that, and this is at the quantum level, at the micro and the macro, right? Is that everything that exists throughout the universe is to our benefit. Becoming aware of that, then one can be ready to live with some level of expectation that whatever I experience today is to my good. And if I can take that into the next day and the next day and the next day, I develop a different sense of my being. I'm no longer stuck in my identity attachment to my developmental pain.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, no, go ahead. If you got a thought, run with it. Let me hear that, because I want to take you back to ketosis whenever you finish with that.
Okay, so yeah, it's interesting. My son that I've talked about is my stepson. He's my husband's from a previous relationship, but I think of him and he sees me as we're one and the same. We don't call each other step or anything.
Sure.
But I've always thought there is a reason why this child was brought into my life, or why I was brought into his life. And for years, I thought it had something to do with just taking, his mother was kind of sick, and so I was just the gift of motherhood for this child.
Mm-hmm.
But as time has gone on and we have evolved and I have healed, I can see it from a much bigger or wider perspective that I was given this child, and he was given me to teach me about unconditional love. I never had that. Everything came with a condition in my life. Everything. And this child and his health and all of these things, raising a child who isn't your own is complicated, but then throw his health conditions on top of that, it made it even more complicated. But it never fails that we may have a difficult day, then we go to bed, and I wake up in the morning loving him more than I did the day before, with a reinvigorated sense of we can do this, we can achieve anything. And yeah, I think everything, just to reiterate what you said, every experience or thing that exists in this universe is for our benefit. And being able to see that is powerful.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Now, maybe take a breath, enhance our calm, and let's. I'd like to have you go back to speak a bit more about ketosis, because there may be some people who have heard about it, heard other people talk about it. But if you could detail ketosis a bit more, it might be to the benefit of many who are going to listen to this.
Sure. So, with trauma or stress, inflammation gets brought up a lot. Ketosis, or the ketogenic diet, is a diet that focuses on lowering carbohydrates and increasing fat. And so usually how the macros gets laid out is it's a 4-to-1 ratio, fat to protein, and then carbohydrates sit between 20 to 30 grams per day. And so what this does is it shifts your cellular energy metabolism. So usually we're glucose burners or sugar burners, but entering a state of ketosis, it's a metabolic state. It shifts the metabolism of your cells from burning glucose to burning fat. And this is a really powerful state to be in because it produces 4 times the amount of energy that glucose does. So lots of people, when they're in this way of eating or this metabolic state, they talk about, oh, I've got so much energy and I can, do anything. And that's because fat produces more energy than burning glucose. But also it takes the mitochondria and it stops the fight or flight response. It allows it to complete what's called the cell danger response. And through that process, it lowers inflammation. And so inflammation is really dangerous because it can go anywhere in the body where there's already some level of compromise. So inflammation can happen in your brain, which drives mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. You get the picture.
I do.
And then it can drive more common physical diseases, which we know to be insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's disease, dementia, high blood pressure, high triglycerides. It can also be linked to fibromyalgia, arthritis. I mean, there's a whole host of conditions. Most conditions actually stem from some level of inflammation. So the ketogenic diet works powerfully on dropping this inflammation, and it works very quickly. And so you begin to see the physical changes right away. But if you're someone who's struggling with some mental health conditions like anxiety and depression, you will start to see some relief quickly, but you might have to stay in this state a little bit longer than, I don't know, someone maybe just trying to reverse insulin resistance. These ketone bodies that we create as a result of going into this metabolic state have the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. And so it really is powerful on the brain in helping to repair some of these chronic conditions caused by childhood trauma.
Okay, let me tell you what I heard you say and give you an opportunity to speak further to them. I heard you say that being in a state of ketosis actually calms the body and actually provides more energy to the body to act. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Talk to people a bit about that some more, because one of the biggest things people complain about is I'm always tired, my brain is foggy, I don't know what to do. Would you explain a little bit more how that all takes place?
Yeah, so the brain fog and the fatigue are a result of what is happening on a cellular level. And ketosis works to help repair that by working on, again, the mitochondria. So the brain fog can be lifted very quickly. And what was the other thing you said? Oh, fatigue?
Yes.
So when people experience things like chronic fatigue or adrenal dysfunction, adrenal crisis, that is also a result of the chronic fight or flight response. So the shifting the metabolic state of your body has the ability to work on the nervous system and calm that fight or flight response. There are some other, some more details that go into this, like you have to have adequate salt intake, you have to have adequate mineral replacement, because as you go into this metabolic state, you begin to flush all of this stuff out of your stored fat cells. And so you have to replace it. So there are some other details to it that also work in conjunction with this metabolic state, like salt works really well on the nervous system and calming that stress response. You need magnesium for some of the similar things. So there are some other key details that, play into all of this, but yeah, did that answer your question?
No,
or
you're
did
doing
I kind
fine.
of go off?
No, you're good. You're good. What I would like you to talk about a bit now, and I want to share my understanding of this first so you can clarify if I make a mess here. Years ago, I used to listen to Tony Robbins talk about there are only two things that motivate human behavior. They are pleasure and pain. And that we take on habits like drugs, sex, alcohol, whatever makes us feel good. We tend to overdo that initially because it makes us feel good, and then we discover that the more we're doing it, it's not making us feel good anymore. We're doing it to avoid pain. And so those kinds of experiences exacerbate whatever childhood trauma has already done to us, and they drive us into the experiences of anger and depression. I've been teaching for years that anger and depression are the same demon. That one, anger is acted out on other people and other things. Depression turns all of that in on itself. And I got to this conclusion because one night I had a dream where a drive-by shooter came up, pulled a gun on me from the car. I took the gun, pistol whipped the dude, and walked away feeling good about myself in the dream. When I studied the dream, I discovered that was my anger turned in on itself, and I woke up a little bit more. Would you talk about anger and depression for a bit?
Yeah, so again, it's another kind of double-edged sword in the childhood trauma world. So inflammation drives depression, drives anger, but at the same time, your anger and depression drive the inflammation. So you're on this vicious circle or cycle, and you have to put something in there. And I spent years going to talk therapy, traditional talk therapy. I think I started in 7th grade. I'd get pulled out of school and go see the therapist for 1 hour once a week. I did that all through high school. Then I went and sought my own therapist. And we never made a dent in my resentments or my anger or my depression. In fact, oftentimes when I left these sessions, I felt worse because I had just sat and relived these moments. So all of these emotions came flooding up again. And inevitably, what I would do would be go home that night and pick up the bottle I'd drink to wash it away. And of course, that doesn't work. But so again, you have to put a stop to it somehow. And for some people, the talking is a pathway out, but you also have to address the underlying, the physical causes that will keep you in that perpetual state of anger and depression and resentment, which is your inflammatory state as well.
No, I got that. I know, again, when we're talking about identity attachment, some of us, until we learn some things like you were sharing, some of us are so attached to our anger and our depression. If you bother that, then I'm going to be upset with you, because how dare you want to help me and take away the thing that substantiated my whole life, all of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting. You can, now being on the other side of it, I'm sure I behaved this way myself, but when I'm speaking with someone and I can see their tone change or their body language change, I can tell I've hit a sore spot.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter how much you point out to someone else, oh, well, this is where this could be stemming from, or I see you're getting defensive, or, did I hit something that, triggered you? Until someone's ready to take a deeper look at it, you can't force anyone into that dark space. I mean, we spend a lot of time running from these dark emotions, thinking that that's going to make it go away by avoiding it. But the truth is, you have to face it. You have to face it head on.
Agreed. I'd like to ask you to talk about one more thing before we just transition into the kinds of services you provide to persons who may be dealing with the kinds of things we've been talking about. Would you talk about arrested development for a moment?
Yeah. So arrested development is interesting. I realized I had heard that term throughout my life. In fact, I think I had a boyfriend in my early 20s buy me a book about, having parents that were alcoholics. And I read it, and I thought, well, that's not me. I'm really mature for my age. I've always been really mature for my age. But when I came out the other side of my addiction, I realized I had some extreme arrested development. The way I interacted with people was really immature. The way I talked to myself was really immature. I was stuck at probably 8 years old, where I decided that I wasn't going to participate in, I can't say loving others, but I decided to shut my access to my heart off at 8 years old after a pretty traumatic experience. And that's where I was stuck until I came out the other side of my addiction. And I'm still, in October, I will have been sober 4 years. I still catch myself at times behaving like that wounded child. and I have to talk to her. I have to see what she's trying to tell me, what she needs. I have to go back and revisit her as a little girl and see what she was missing and try to give that to myself now to repair that.
I love that you said that, because it's a practice that I do too. There are times that I feel it necessary, and I call this little brother Little O, right? I go back and visit Little O and talk to him about understanding what he's feeling and why he's coping the way he's learned to cope. But I want to encourage him to just keep his eyes open and his ears open and his heart open, because some things are going to come to end his terrifying situation. But I need to do that. I wish I had someone to be able to do that for me. But because I grew up in this family that everybody thought was all that, right? Then nobody thought any of us needed anything. But and my siblings and I have talked about this over the years. Some of us have actually said our parents should have never had children. I'm really glad they did. But I understand the thought of it all. Listen, thank you for speaking to that. I just want people to understand that because of the hurts that we have been through, we could literally be stuck at the age that experience took place and continue to take place. And until we can come to grips with facing that, we might forever be acting out our 8 and 10 and 12-year-old selves.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
So would you begin to talk to us, Kelley, about the moment you realized that you had something to offer others who could benefit from the kind of experience that you've survived and grown from?
You know, I think that I think there's been something that has lived in me forever that realized I could help people. I just didn't know how that would play out. But I realized I had something probably, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago. I met this incredible community of women on Instagram, and the more we talked, they asked a lot of questions about how did I do this, or how did I overcome this? And I thought, I had always viewed my growth path, my growth journey as being behind everyone else. I thought, I'm just behind, and I'm going to be behind for the rest of my life. But the more I met these women that had similar experiences, the more I realized I might be a little further ahead than I thought I was. Mm-hmm. And even being 2 steps ahead of someone else is enough it's enough to be able to turn back behind and pass along whatever I gained in those 2 steps to help someone else. So I don't have to be fully healed or this, incredibly rich, successful trauma therapist or whatever it is to be able to help others. I can help people exactly where I am with the tools that I have right in this very moment.
No doubt. So would you just continue on with what you began to do when you realized that? How did you begin to reach out to women, or were women reaching out to you? And how did you develop definition for what you were doing as you began to work with a group of women?
So women were reaching out to me. I'm kind of shy. I don't put myself out there a whole lot, or at least I didn't in the past. So the connections that I started to develop were from other women reaching out to me, just from me sharing a few stories on my Instagram page, made other women feel comfortable enough to trust me and share some of their stories with me. And then and then I decided, well, I'm going to do a coaching practice. I'm going to help others. And I had set a date of December 31st of 2022, I believe it was, right? Yeah. And we got up to Christmas, and I thought, oh, I haven't done anything. So it's not some spectacular thing where I laid out all of this stuff. I just posted on my thing, I'm doing a coaching option, and whoever wants to join can join. And I let it kind of organically unfold. And then a few months in, I put a call out to women asking them to do kind of a survey with me to see where their struggles were, what kind of services they would want if they were looking for help. And that kind of helped me define where I would put my focus. And so that kind of developed addressing the physical body and, things like insulin resistance and high blood pressure, all of that stuff. And then after I laid the foundation for my physical health component, I started addressing the emotional and spiritual aspect of it. And so it's just been kind of organic, and I let it unfold as things come to me or as I'm approached by someone who expresses a certain need.
Okay. Do you feel it inappropriate for you to talk about the most common things that you see amongst the people who are attracted to you for help? If that's more than we should do, don't do it. But I'd like to know what the trends are that you are seeing, so that people can hear if they're in one of these trends, they might know someone like you they can reach out to.
Sure. So a common trend, well, probably the most common things are chronic pain, unexplained, undiagnosable chronic pain, whether that's headaches, joint pain, muscle pains, liver pains, and then anxiety and depression, dealing with abandonment wounds, that's a big one. Fear, uncontrollable, just driven by fear that they're going to get cancer, fear that they're dying, fear that they're never going to find someone else, just a lot of fear. And then the more, the easier to address things are like insulin resistance, the inability to lose weight, poor sleep habits or poor disrupted sleep. They never feel rested, brain fog, fatigue. I think those are the most common things. And usually each person will have a myriad of these symptoms. I very rarely interact with anyone who just says, oh, I just want to lose 5 pounds. They're like, I've got, this weight I want to lose, and my brain's all foggy, and I don't sleep very well, and I'm kind of sad all the time. So it usually comes as a package deal in my experience.
I understand. I would certainly agree with you. I would say to you that I find exactly the same thing. The one chronic pain I know is common to too many women, and rather than sort it out the way you just presented opportunity to do so, it's just kind of tolerated and accepted because they've heard somebody say, "Oh, that's just a way of life. However old you are, this kind of happens then," and people don't realize that's just all BS.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask this question now because I find it extremely important in the work that I do, and I know that you're doing the same thing. We just haven't used the word yet. How much does love prompt what you are doing?
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10.
I understand.
I mean, yeah.
No, roll with that. I fully get it.
What I am doing is driven by love. I have learned and felt I have felt the power of love coming from myself, and I want other people to feel this because for 40 years of my life, I did not know what it meant to love myself. And it's not a, oh, looking in the mirror and, oh, you're so pretty kind of thing. It's a sitting by myself, and when I take notice of what it is I'm doing, I realize I'm sitting there with a big smile on my face, and I am radiating joy and peace. And I want every woman on this planet to feel that same feeling, because that's what we came here to do.
Oh, I'm in sync with you there so much. I knew that as my awakening was fully engaged. I got up to speak to an audience one Saturday morning. I had a manuscripted speech. People were going to eat it up just because they asked me to come and do it. But as I walked to the podium to speak, the voice that speaks to me said, throw that away and talk to people out of your heart with what has happened to you, because that's where they're all struggling that right now. And so I did that. And that became the new MO for me, because listen, we know that nothing's real till it's personal. And until I could share the very real, important things that people really want to experience, then nobody was really going to be getting anything of value out of me. So just like you, when I discovered that I actually liked myself now, and that I could love myself now, everything shifted. I had something authentic to share because I had become my more authentic person. Would you talk about that just for a bit, becoming more authentic to oneself?
Yeah. So besides addressing inflammation with my clients, I also have them work on things like gratitude, trust, resolving their resentments, apologizing to the people we've hurt in our past, and then giving ourselves recognition for the good things that we do, the positive changes we have made, recognizing when we've done something right, because our brains are so good at pointing out the flaws. And I think through these steps, lowering your inflammation and then going through these other things, gratitude, trust, all of this, you start to unpack the baggage that you've been carrying, and you start to see yourself for who you really are. You're like, oh, I'm actually a really thoughtful person. I was just too shy or embarrassed to offer my services to other people, or I don't know. We start to see our gifts that have been hiding underneath. And there is some work to this uncovering your authentic self, but I don't think it's as complicated as it seems before you get started. It just happens naturally as you go through these steps of learning to practice gratitude and shifting your mindset and learning to trust yourself again. You're like, oh, I'm actually kind of a really cool person.
I understand. I do. I get it. One of the things that I discovered I've gone to therapy a few times whenever I believed it necessary, and there was no one in my immediate circle who could help me think my thoughts through. The last time I went to therapy, I saw this person one time, because after I presented my issues I was concerned about and had this professional talk back to me about their perception of what I was doing, I decided I was okay. I didn't really need to come back there because I was listening to the voices of others in my head critique me over against being able to validate myself because I knew I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I know people go through that at times, because if we ask people too early on when we're working with them, who are you? All we do is throw them back into their brain fog and they get lost. Because, very few of us can answer that question. Who are we? That takes a minute. But once we can, we're free and we're liberated and we're empowered to go and not just be a benefit to ourselves, but to other people. Yeah. Kelley, tell people how, finish that thought, but I want you to tell people how they can have access to you.
Well, I was just going to say it's interesting. I had this one particular therapist who I loved a lot, but he would ask me hard questions like that. Who are you? And I couldn't ever answer it. I had no clue who I was because of all this armor and, this armor that I had built to protect myself. Now, if you asked me that question, I could give you a pretty clear picture of who I am, and I think that's pretty spectacular growth.
I gotcha. I do. Now, please tell people how they may access you and your services.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Kelley Croff. It's KelleyCroff. And you can DM me or respond to one of my posts, and I'll get back to you. And that's about it. I'm not on Facebook or anything else, so just through Instagram.
All right. Now, what closing words or thoughts would you like to leave our listeners with?
I would just say if there is any spark within you that thinks there is something on the other side of this darkness that you might be experiencing, to follow that spark, to reach out to someone who has already taken the steps. Find someone you admire who is in that kind of same area and ask them how they did it. See what they did to get themselves out and just take that first step, and you will be amazed at how quickly things can change.
Oh, that's really good. That's right in sync with one of Dr. King's most famous quotes. It says, when you see the staircase, don't let it scare you. All you got to do is take the first step.
Yeah.
And then a step after that. I mean, it's really that simple. Lao Tzu said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. African proverbs always say, begin right where you are. And it's so simple, it gets past us.
Yes.
Kelley, I want to tell you something. This is one of the most incredible hours I've ever spent with someone. And if there's anything to having a sister or a sibling of the soul, I'm adopting you. I mean, you are laying out for people the possibilities of experiencing life at its highest and its finest levels. And I'm just incredibly grateful to you for that.
Oh, thank you, Oscar. You're going to make me cry.
Hey, well, you're not doing it by yourself. When I experience you and what you are doing and where you've come from to do what you're doing, I know that there's a power greater than us that's inspiring us to do the kinds of things that we do.
Yes, sir.
All righty. Thank you for joining me today. And for all of you who may have the privilege to listen to this podcast, what we have talked to you about today and what you've heard Kelley just draw attention to, these things are not just things that happen to us. We're not that special, but we caught something. We caught a ray of sunlight that gave us new code for how we can experience our physical body and our emotional self. We've been privileged to do that. And we want you to know that you can do the same thing. What Kelley said to you is pay attention to sunlight hours. Get out in the sunlight. Get out there early. Pay attention to that we were programmed to sleep when it's dark and to get up when the sun comes up, and that those things predispose us to health. Kelley, we didn't get to talk about grounding, but we both know how that focuses on the transfer of ions from the earth into our bodies, that stabilizes our red blood cells. I mean, there's so many things that work together here that we've just never been taught, that are just miracle workers in us, but they're very matter-of-factly nature living alive in us. And so we just want to encourage all who are listening, these things are available to you. Ladies, I'm saying to you, if you are on the fence about allowing somebody to help you influence your thinking and your development, Kelley Croff is a good person for you to work with. All right.
Thank you, Oscar.
I am grateful for you. And
I'm grateful for you.
Thank you, and I thank others for joining us for You're in the Healing Zone. Until next time, I'm Oscar Crawford.
Thank you for listening. If you know women that can benefit from this podcast, please share it with them. Together, We help women heal one wounded woman at a time. Reach out to your In the Healing Zone at healingwithoscarcrawford@gmail.com. Or, call 480-228-4654. Add +1 for all international calls. You're in the Healing Zone is produced by Oscar Crawford Media.